Geheid mir Falcha. Welcome everyone, my name is Darren Kuzma and this is Mind the Crack. It's a series of webinars that we're doing on life improvement tools and life hacks, and I hope you'll get a lot of advantage out of joining me and taking part in them. I certainly have enjoyed the series we just completed, which was on study and learning. We do hope to circle around and touch on that subject again once we get a bit of feedback to hear what people are wanting to learn more about. But the immediate set of webinars that we're embarking on is on the subject of motivation. And today's subject, as an introduction, is what is inner motivation. Now, we are doing this as a webinar, and the purpose of that is to engage with you, to encourage participation. And I know one of the principles that is very helpful for learning something is to reflect and look at the activities and things that you have been doing, perhaps the things that didn't work, and then consider some new information and combine that or compare it to what you're currently doing. And by comparing the information of what you have done with what you're being presented with, you can see if it fits nicely. You can use some logic to see whether you should try it out, or even just try it out and see how it goes. Or you might see it might clash with certain views, beliefs, or ideas that you have, in which case, whatever is true is what's true for you, as L. Ron Hubbard said. So I'm going to check in right now on Zoom. I am live here on a Zoom chat. I can just type in and say hi to everyone that is joining me here. And if you're joining us on the other platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, as it might be, it's not just myself live here on the Zoom chat. I also have a host, Michelle. She'll be there monitoring the other platforms. And as I mentioned, because it is a webinar, we're looking for participation. And the more that you participate in that way, the better off that you will be, because you'll get more out of it. So if you're listening and you're there and you're on the other platforms, give us a thumbs up, give us a wave, a like, anything like that, just to let me know that you're here. And Michelle, who's the host, will send through to Zoom and we can keep in correspondence that way. Okay, so moving back, we're on inner motivation, a whole series of webinars on motivation. So my experience with motivation, first of all, I'm not the most motivated person that I know, but I was motivated enough to get through 5 years of university, do a lot of postgraduate study. I trained for triathlons, a triathlon where you need to persist with physical activity of a rather intense level over at least 2 hours. I've run marathon distances and longer. I trained as a surf lifesaver in Australia in the very arduous cold winter months in Australia, still acting in that capacity. And then I even did some things that you might not say required motivation, maybe a little bit more courage or stupidity, like scuba diving with sharks or jumping out of a perfectly well operating safe airplane with a parachute, also known as skydiving. And I've also had a successful business, and I have actually helped thousands of people with their own motivation using and based on the information of L. Ron Hubbard as he writes in Scientology. So I'll be referring a lot to these books here in this next series on motivation, covering all the different topics that there are here. And because motivation is a fairly broad subject, there are a lot of factors to it. There are some points that I think deserve highlighting, and I would encourage you that joining me with these highlights will hopefully encourage you and see the sense and the logic in the approach that L. Ron Hubbard had. And looking at my experience when I hadn't read the information of L. Ron Hubbard, and then when I did. And you'll hopefully get that contrast and see how it can make sense for you too. Okay, so moving right along. Fantastic. We've got someone there on Facebook saying, hello. Hi, Waleed. Good to see that you've joined us today. I hope you enjoy this webinar. And if you have any stories you'd like to tell, I always like to have correspondence going. So here we go. So inner motivation. So really you need inner motivation, because if you don't have inner motivation and you want to be active and involved in life, you're going to receive at some point the pressure, the duress, the challenge of external motivation. Now, I don't know about you, but I much prefer to have myself motivated to do something rather than being told you have to do so and so, etc., etc. But there are some people who, it is a bit of an Australian thing to be told, oh, you can't do so and so, or I bet you can't achieve this. Just that will motivate some people, especially Aussies, in a way, just so that you can prove that person wrong. It's like, yes, actually I am able to do it. I don't care what you say, I can do it. And just to kind of like prove them wrong. Now, obviously there are some negative aspects of the external motivation and risking some of those just so that you can, prove that other source wrong is sometimes an effective way of building or mustering, motivation, but not necessarily, I'm going to say, the most effective. Having inner motivation is definitely much more effective. Unless, of course, you want to be wrapped in cotton wool, close your eyes tight, block your ears, in which case you're not really of any use to anyone, let alone yourself. So, inner motivation is definitely the key. I think about actually just mentioning Australians as I did there. I want to tell you a little story or compare something here. So I think that type of thing for Australians anyway can't compare for other things. If you think about it, when Australians were, well, not Australians at that time, but when convicts were shipped from the UK down to Terra Australis, they were sent down there along with, as the convicts, they were sent down there with the military men that were disobedient or subordinate or original, authentic thinkers and that sort of thing. Whoever the establishment in the United Kingdom wanted to get rid of, they sent them down to Australia. And when they arrived in that Terra Australis down there, they took a look around and they said, well, they think that we're going to die down here, do they? Well, we'll show them. And having that attitude, perhaps from that, first fleet voyage, perhaps has been bred and encouraged throughout the period of time in Australia. Those first fleet people, the convicts that first landed there, I think that they may have been responsible for a few other things as well. You can imagine they're there, and obviously in the wild bush, you may have heard Australia has many poisonous and dangerous animals and that sort of thing. And rather than it remaining Terra Australis, which is great southern land when translated from its Latin roots or whatever it might be, you could imagine someone being told, looking through the bush and saying, oh, James, isn't this fantastic Terra Australia? Ah! Being frightened from the wildlife. Anyway, that's a theory. Not sure how true that is. But in addition to that, I think that the first fleeters, when they arrived there, took a look around and they said, all right, what are we going to make of this? Well, it's warm all year round. We've got all this meat bouncing around. Let's have barbecues outside because the English can't do that. And let's make up a beer and we're going to call it Foster's because we were kicked out of our home and we'll just show them how much they really did care for us. But the attitude in Australia is definitely, I have seen, quite different from a number of other countries. I have traveled the US. The US is a definitely motivated kind of country. Australia is a definitely motivated kind of country. And there are other countries that definitely fall a little bit below that. I've also traveled through Asia, and I will say that motivation seems to be a little bit lacking there in the general population. There's quite a bit of apathy around. So we'll talk about some of those things in later webinars, but I wanted to now look at the definition of motivation, okay? And then use that to understand this concept of motivation a little bit more. So here we are. If you are not the type of person to have inner motivation, how do you get it? Okay, so as I said, definition of motivation. Definition 1, a reason or reasons for acting or behaving in a particular way. And it gives an example sentence, and this is from the Oxford Dictionary. Escape can be a strong motivation for travel. So the desire to, the reason for travel could be that you want to escape. So as a reason given. All right, let's have a look at that a little bit further and give an example. So what is reason? Well, really, it's some information. And information that then results in a behavior being adopted. What type of behavior? Well, the type of behavior that will result in you surviving in respect to the information or the context of the information you've been presented. I'm going to give you an example. So, when I was young, in Australia, you were taught how to cross the road. You're brought to the road, basically, or the learning occurs at the road, and it's like, okay, so you need to cross the road, walk across, when there's no cars coming, because you see those cars are big, and if they hit you, you might get seriously injured or die. So when you cross the road, wait until there's no cars. In other words, you have to look. When there's no cars, then you cross. So having that information about, mortal injury or death certainly then creates a change in your behavior. You decide then to just apply that because of its consequences and because you want to survive, and it changes. So there's an example of information changing a behavior in a certain way. So to that point, I just want to say one thing, is that last time I went home to Australia, in my local neighborhood, areas that had T intersections. When I was growing up, there was no signs, nothing. It was just that logic or that information that would preside, you had a knowledge of the simple knowledge of physics, the rules of the road, and common courtesies. So if you pull up at a T intersection, you observe, you look for cars, you see no cars, and then you take your turn, drive even if there was. But now when I went home, there is warning signs, T intersection ahead, another warning sign, drive slowly, children at play. And one of the reasons I think that there's still just as many accidents, or there are still accidents occurring, even in spite of all those warning signs, is because of that Australian mentality. They want to try to achieve something that they're told that they can't really. They don't want to be aware of a T intersection or drive slowly. They go, I'm going to take this corner, not driving slowly, and I'm going to see if I can still not hit any kids. So that attitude with Australians, I'm not sure where it comes from, but there's some ideas. Okay, so let's look at the next definition. So we gave the first one, receiving some information or a reasons that change your behavior in a certain way. Okay, so definition 2. Desire or willingness to do something, and enthusiasm. With an example sentence here, keep staff up to date and maintain interest and motivation. All right, okay, so this is a desire or willingness, so some sort of emotional state that's created that then causes or results in something being done. And if we look at both of the definitions, really you'll see that the idea or the end result of motivation is that there is something done. So this is in contrast to, if we look at, okay, so there's the reasons, or there's this desire, or there's willingness. It's quite different from the person that you hear and he talks about all these grand ideas. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start a business, and I'm going to sell these things, and I'm going to make $1 million, and I'm going to go this, and I'm going to go riding on the weekend, and I'm going to compete in this race, and I'm going to do a marathon this year, and all this sort of thing. But then in reality, all they're doing is sitting at home with their Wi-Fi headphones on, watching their TV or their internet, not doing anything except for twiddling with the remote control. Okay, so there is enthusiasm in that way. You might also be aware, as I have definitely seen myself, someone that is on drugs. You can see it now. Someone has this amazing idea. Oh, dude, he's wasted. Oh, dude, I think we could clean the spire for 420 grand for the council. Me and little Mickey, we would just fly up there with our sponges and wipe it down in no time. That's the easiest plan for 420 grand. Now, in reality, that's not going to work, but the dreaming, the aspirations, and the enthusiasm, you could say, of someone under the influence doesn't get realized at the end of the day, and that is what we're talking about should be the result of motivation, is that there is something that is done. Okay, so before I move on, I'm going to check in over here with Michelle and live on Zoom. If any of you have got any stories or any experiences with motivation, what difficulties that you're having, if there is a certain activity you're trying to motivate yourself to do, put it into the chat, send a message across through the comments on any of those platforms, and I'd like to hear about it so I can make comment on it, and perhaps this information that I'm going to start to present will really be applicable for that particular thing. Okay, so here we go on the next step. When motivation is effective, it results in action. And that's where I would like to bring in a couple of important points from these materials. So L. Ron Hubbard realized that there was a relationship between three things, and therefore it forms a triangle. So we have knowledge, responsibility, and control. When you gain more knowledge, you can therefore, in that particular area or in relation to that thing you have knowledge of, you can control that thing better. Simply, it might be the matter of using a tool. So, using a hammer might be something that is very easy to do. You could see it, you pick it up, and you hammer a nail in. But if you know, in order to be the most efficient with the swing, is you hold the hammer closer to the bottom, and you can hold with two hands if you need to, there are certain mechanics or certain pieces of information that if you knew that about a hammer, you could control it much better. And likewise, the other point of that triangle is responsibility. So the more you could control something, the more information you had about something, the more responsible you could be for it. If you knew that the handle on the hammer was made of rubber and therefore couldn't be exposed to certain chemicals, otherwise it would be damaged, then you could take responsibility. You could cause that hammer to maintain its proper use and its proper form and shape and comfort when you use it, simply because you had the knowledge and because you could control it in terms of lifting it and moving it and putting it in safe places. So L. Ron Hubbard found those three things are definitely related. And one of the most important points, if not the most important point in Scientology, is that knowledge is the thing that you start with, that is the entrance point. It is the spearhead into any problem. Because when you have knowledge, it is power. And that knowledge and that power then allows action, change of conditions, and better or improvement in things. Okay, so I'm going to then talk about the next step from there. So we've got this triangle, the knowledge, responsibility, and control, with the knowledge being the most important point. And it is the point of all of these books here. Why is there so much knowledge in Scientology? Well, in order to solve life's problems, you do need to know the information about them and the technology that you need to solve them. And that's why so many books here, and we're going to direct you to these as we go through the following webinars. Okay, so before I get on to the next step, I just want to check in. I'm just going to ask Michelle a question. Just asking if anyone has made any comments there, if you'd like me to share a little bit of what you have viewed so far. Okay, so quick summary, recap. Inner motivation, way better than external motivation, though external motivation does have its place, as you might see in the next point that I'm going to mention. And real motivation coming from yourself, being generated by yourself, and we look at these definitions again and its relationship to knowledge. A reason or reasons, definition of motivation, a reason or reasons for acting or behaving in a certain way. So you get some information, you can control things, you can be responsible in a different way. A desire or willingness is created, then you can have more desire or willingness to do something. So again, that end result is to do something. Now, I did speak about the concept of the rubber meets the road. So right now we're just really looking at knowledge, and really knowledge doesn't have to result in doing something. You could sit back, sit on your couch, watch YouTube videos all day and say that you're imbibing and bringing and receiving all this knowledge. Great, so what does it do? Doesn't necessarily do anything. So there are these axioms that L. Ron Hubbard researched and basically came up with. So what is an axiom? Let me define that for you. An axiom is a statement which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true. Okay? So an example of an axiom could be that sport builds character. So someone participates in sport, they win, they lose, that develops or builds their character in some way. So you would say that that is a self-evident truth. You've seen anyone that competes in sports, their character has been built or elevated in some way by virtue of them competing, winning, losing, just entering into the game. Okay, so an axiom is a self-evident truth. And this is an incredible axiom, and this is part of the book called Handbook for Pre-Clears. So in Scientology, when someone is on a journey themselves to reach a state mentally or in their mind where they want to be clear and free of unwanted emotions, when they want to become more themselves, we would call that being in the state of clear. And someone who is not yet at the state of clear is a pre meaning before. So they're on their way to achieving this state. So this handbook details all of the axioms that L. Ron Hubbard put together, and I'm going to draw your attention to one particular one. And the axiom reads, "The mind does with thought as it has done with entities in the physical universe." Okay, entities being objects, people, things in the physical universe. Okay, the physical universe being the physical environment, greater, the most immediate, and greater and surrounding you. Okay, so the mind does with thought as it has done with entities in the physical universe. Okay, let's break that down a little bit more and analyze it and see how that would work. So here's the thing, you're gathering knowledge and you want it to result in some sort of doingness. But we know that doingness, or how you treat things in the physical universe, or what things you do with the physical universe, with entities in the physical universe, what you do with them is how your mind will operate. And when you consider what thoughts are, and what is contained, or what words are, or what symbols are, all of these things symbolize something in the physical universe, something in the physical environment, whether it be an expressed emotion, whether it be a color, whether it be an action. All of the different words and symbols are already existing in the physical universe first before they really occur in the mind. So here we go. Doing things in the physical universe will then result in your mind thinking in that same way. So I'll read the axiom one more time. The mind does with thought. So your thoughts will go into action and make calculations or computations or go through steps so the mind does with thought as it has done with entities in the physical universe. So this is where the rubber meets the road, is that you have to, through discipline, through internal motivation, through will, or some sort of push. Now, it could be the external motivation, and this is where I draw that being part of it. If you have this activity initiated, when you get something done, the more you do it, the more you develop that as a habit, the more you reinforce it with doing this, the more your mind will work in that exact same way, further reinforcing it. And this is the way out of the dwindling spiral. So rather than sitting in the couch, body's in the couch, and the mind is thinking, let's go and do so-and-so. Let's go ahead and go for that run. I want to shed a few pounds, let me go for that run. But instead, you stay sat in the chair watching the television, then the mind will do and start to act in that way when you have choices and things that you can do. It'll say, well, it doesn't really matter, I'll just sit here and do nothing. Because in the physical universe, that's what you did. You did exactly the same thing. So you have to break that cycle. That is where the rubber meets the road. That is the first thing that needs to be done, whether it's external, drive, or it comes for yourself. And bear in mind, this can be on a gradient. It can be that effort being exerted to actually go through motions doesn't have to be running a marathon on day one. It doesn't have to be stressing yourself out to the point of an absolute sweat from day one. Taking things on a gradient, even just getting up, going through the routine of getting into your clothes, going for a walk down the street and back. Very, very simple, but because there was a doing this that resulted from that thought, there was a doing this, your your mind then created in the physical universe action, that will reinforce that whole pattern. And then, as you're gaining the knowledge about what is the right thing to do, you're controlling all the factors that are related to the thing you want to do. You're getting more information about them, and then going through the actions of it, you will then achieve inner motivation. Now, all that being said, there is an extra point that I'm going to direct you to, and this has to do with the unwanted mental emotions and how they can get trapped in your mind and as baggage start to accumulate, which is part of the dwindling spiral. So I'm talking about there, in a way, how to get out of it, rising above it, getting into action. But there is another part. And to answer that, I would like to direct you to a webinar that a friend of mine, Vincent, is doing this evening at 8 p.m. You can tune in on the same channels that you're watching on all the same platforms. And he is going to discuss some things in relation to this book here, Dianetics, and the mechanics of how it works, that your mind influences you in a negative way. And what I'm talking about here is the tools that you can use yourself, almost independently. And when we look at Dianetics and what Vincent will explain, he will cover a number of things that when you want to enter into the full journey and handling your mind from both aspects, then he will certainly outline all those details. So join me in the next coming week or so as we look at more of the different factors of motivation that are covered in the information that L. Ron Hubbard has written. Join Vincent this Friday tonight at 8 p.m. He'll go over more of the factors in relation to that. And my next webinar is tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. where I'll be joined by Devonte. We'll have a little bit of a two-way chat discussing some of the failures and some of the mechanics of when you don't do things, what happens and the result of that. So for now, I'm just checking over here on Zoom to see who we've got, and Michelle gives me the thumbs up. If you'd like to find out which of these books would most appropriately apply to you and the position that you're at or what you're trying to handle with motivation, then what I would like you to do is click on the link that's going to appear in all the different platforms that you're following. That link will allow you to register for a free consultation with one of our staff. No obligation, but for you to find out which one of these books will most appropriately fit you and the information that you seek to then put into action and start pulling yourself out of it with your inner motivation. Please do it, go ahead. So that link will appear there. When my Zoom window closes down, the logo will stay there for a period of time. So if you'd like to privately message or send chats after the webinar, please do. But for now, Michelle, if you can put that link into all the different windows so people know how they can contact us. But please join me for the remaining webinars on this subject, as we're going to discuss topics from each of these books so you can get a bit more of an insight into each of them and help you decide what it is that you need to do to get through or follow through your path to motivation and achieving the things that you want to do in life. Okay, Sinead for today. We'll see you next time.